What if I told you that Lewis Hamilton is exposing Charles Leclerc's biggest weakness at Ferrari? So after the first 5 races, in terms of points, we have Lewis Hamilton at 72 points, we have Charles Leclerc at 75 points. After the kind of season that Lewis Hamilton had in 2025, I don't think there are many that would have expected him to be this competitive against Charles in 2026. But kudos to him to have the kind of improvement that he's had. At the same time, however, what Lewis Hamilton is doing in 2026 at Ferrari is he's exposing what is Charles Leclerc's biggest weakness. It is the fact that he is just too nice. So to explain, I'll break the video down into 3 parts. The first part will be where we'll take a look at the first 5 races, then we'll take a look at the specific pattern, and finally we'll take a look at what I mean by Charles Leclerc being too nice and that being something which Lewis Hamilton has taken advantage of. So first of all, let's take a look at the first 5 races and the kind of form guide that has been there between these two teammates. So at Australia, I'd say we had Charles Leclerc having a bit of an edge over Lewis Hamilton in qualifying. Then even in the race, I'd say Leclerc was the faster driver. There are questions being asked by a lot of Lewis Hamilton fans. They look at Lewis Hamilton closing the gap to Leclerc later in the Australian Grand Prix. I'd say that comes down to Leclerc just managing the race and not trying to push the engine and the car a bit too hard because it was the first race. Then came the second race in China, and in the Chinese Grand Prix, it is safe to say that Lewis Hamilton had the edge in both qualifying and in the race on Sunday. China is one of Lewis Hamilton's favorite tracks, and it showed in the kind of performance he put together. Then the third race was in Japan, and ideally I think the Japanese Grand Prix is one race where you can maybe claim that this was a race weekend that was very similar to how the 2025 season went for Lewis. Throughout the race weekend, Charles Leclerc had a bit of an edge over Lewis Hamilton over a single lap, and he had a similar edge over Lewis over the long runs in the race. That's why we saw Leclerc finish on the podium and Lewis was P6. After this, we had the race in Miami, and once again, I think there were a lot of similarities to Japan. Leclerc once again had a bit of an edge in qualifying, and even in the race, I'd say he had an edge over Lewis Hamilton. He did end up finishing behind Lewis. It was due to the error that he made on the last lap of the race. But overall, in terms of performance and what he was able to extract from the car, he seemed to have the edge over Lewis Hamilton. After Miami came the Canadian Grand Prix, and I think the Canadian Grand Prix is the single most one-sided drubbing that either of the Ferrari drivers have had on their teammates. Lewis Hamilton had the edge over Leclerc in qualifying, then he had the edge in the race as well. It did appear that by midway through the race weekend, Leclerc kind of gave up. In the race, he would have ideally finished around 10 to 12 seconds behind Lewis, but once he saw that there was no point in pushing because there was no one behind him, he just made sure that he managed the car and brought the points home. So after 5 races, what we have is a scenario where Leclerc was potentially faster than Lewis Hamilton in 3 races, and Lewis had the edge in the other 2. In terms of podiums, both of them have 2 podiums each, and it is very neck and neck. You can say that it is very competitive between the 2 teammates. Now, after taking a look at the form guide in the first 5 races, let's take a look at the worrying pattern that Leclerc has had at Ferrari. It is in the last few years, what has become quite evident is Ferrari building a car and Leclerc making sure that he adapts to whatever the demands are. In 2022, it was quite clear that the Ferrari that was put together, it suited Leclerc's style beautifully, and Leclerc had a massive advantage over Carlos Sainz. Carlos ended up having multiple accidents and he suffered when it came to controlling or taming that beast. Ultimately, what Ferrari did, they did not focus on the lead driver. Instead, they focused on making the car a bit more pliable for Carlos Sainz. In the end, the gap between Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz reduced. Then we had something similar in 2023 and 2024, where multiple times the development directions that Ferrari took, it worked more towards Carlos Sainz's driving style, and Leclerc was the one who adapted. And once the adaptation was done, he was more or less able to get on top of whatever the car's demands were and have a decent gulf over Carlos Sainz. In 2026, what we are looking at right now is a scenario where Lewis Hamilton has extensively put his input into the SF26. This is something that he was very, very explicit about in 2025, where he said that the 2025 was a car which had no input from him, and hence he found it hard to truly understand what the car wanted. For the SF26, Lewis Hamilton's inputs have been extensive. Leclerc, on the other hand, if you remember, this was something that was posed to him as a question in 2025, where he was asked that if the Ferrari's 2026 package will have extensive inputs from Lewis Hamilton, will it impact Leclerc? Leclerc's answer, it was indicative and it showed a few things as well. because what Leclerc said was he didn't really care about the demands or the characteristics that the Ferrari package would want. What he specifically wanted was the fastest possible car. The adaptation, they should leave it to him. He will adapt to whatever the package wants. Now, on one side, it shows a driver who's confident in his ability to adapt to whatever the package will have. On the other side, what it also shows is Leclerc as a driver ceding ground within the team. Would a Max Verstappen want an Isaac Hadjar to have extensive input in car development and build a car that suits his driving style more? I don't think the answer is yes to that question. And I don't think the answer would be yes to this question if Lewis Hamilton was the incumbent driver and Leclerc wanted to give extensive input in the next year's car. And I think this is where what we are going to see in 2026 is a similar pattern emerge that we've seen with Carlos Sainz in the past. In the next few races, we are going to see once again Leclerc slowly get on top of the demands of this package. What we've seen this season so far in the first 5 races is the SF26 package, it comes naturally to Lewis. Compare that to Charles Leclerc, it does appear that the package does not come naturally to him. He's been forced to adapt a lot to this car, and I think that is why we are looking at a scenario where Leclerc has a steeper learning curve compared to Lewis, where every race weekend what we see from him is both the drivers will start more or less on the same level, but slowly Leclerc will pull away. For 2026, I won't be surprised that we see a scenario where Leclerc once again, as the season progresses, will slowly start pulling away from Lewis Hamilton and establish an advantage. And this is where we come to the third part, where we talk about why Charles Leclerc being too nice has been detriment to his career. And I think this is where we need to ask one very important question. Charles Leclerc has been a part of Ferrari since 2019. This is his 8th year with the team. Since 2020, I think it is safe to say that Charles Leclerc has been the benchmark at Ferrari. That's 7 years. So why does Ferrari, a team that has had the same team leader since 2020, why does that team not galvanize around the lead driver? Why is a team like Ferrari not putting together a model similar to what Red Bull has for Max Verstappen, where every penny that is spent at Milton Keynes, it is spent to make sure that Max Verstappen becomes a world champion? There's a reason why the Red Bulls of the yesteryears that we've had, and potentially how the current Red Bull is also going to behave, these Red Bulls have had a very sensitive front end. And why that happens is because that is something that suits Max Verstappen and that is something that works for him. Why has Ferrari, on the other hand, not made sure that every penny that is spent by the team in Maranello is spent to make Charles Leclerc the world champion? In terms of driving, and when it comes to skills on track, I don't think there is much to separate between Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc. There's very little to separate between these two drivers. And in my view, these two drivers are the top 2 drivers in F1 right now. And they have been for the last few years. But the problem is, it does appear that neither Ferrari nor Charles Leclerc are able to identify the kind of talent that Charles Leclerc is. I don't think Charles Leclerc appreciates the level which he performs, and I don't think that's why he does not drag his weight within Ferrari. Ideally, when Lewis Hamilton came to Ferrari and demanded a lot of specific things, that was the point where Leclerc should have spoken up, because all these things that have been asked, they've been to the detriment of Leclerc to a certain extent, because Leclerc now has a much steeper learning curve compared to his teammate. And this is exactly the problem with Leclerc. On track, he's ridiculously vicious. He will be ferocious when it comes to wheel-to-wheel battles. He will pull out every 10th from the car in qualifying or in the race. He won't leave an inch in any circumstance. But off track, I think that is the area where there's a decent gulf between Charles Leclerc and a world champion. There's one thing that is very common between a Max Verstappen, a Lewis Hamilton, a Fernando Alonso, a Sebastian Vettel, a Michael Schumacher. And that thing is, all these drivers were ferociously selfish. And what that meant is, they will demand every inch from the team. They will ask for every inch within the team and they will not cede ground. And what I've seen from Charles Leclerc in his partnership with Carlos Sainz and currently in his partnership with Lewis Hamilton is that Leclerc cedes ground within the team. If we solely talk about his performance on the track, I think he's as good as anyone. But off track, I think he's leaving a lot to be desired. And I think this is a major weakness for him. I really hope this serves as a learning lesson for Charles Leclerc, because the more you see how world champions conduct themselves within the team, the more you're going to learn. Charles Leclerc, he's missing the ruthlessness of the track. And I think Lewis Hamilton has exposed it at Ferrari. Whether Leclerc makes amends and improvements or not, I think we'll have to wait and see. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments.